you have a new collaboration.
Yes, I got all excited.
So we need to know about that. Do you have the name for the book?
A Dangerous Talent. And since my background, my degree is in art, and I miss Chris Nordgren, and of course I don't want Gideon to hear this, but Chris was my favorite. So, and then Aaron actually wrote another book with a protagonist, Ben Revere, Loot, that had the art world in it. And so it was just too tempting to think about.
And so your new series is going to be about the art world again.
Right, and it's a female protagonist, Alex London, and she is a art consultant, and partly because of it's fun to do something.
Well, can you read from this book that isn't even out yet?
That would be, we'd love to do that.
Please do that.
Isn't it lucky that we just happened to bring
Yeah, you just happen to have some scripts.
I just wish I'd rehearsed it a little bit more.
There you go. This is what we thought, instead of getting into the art technicalities, we thought we'd introduce the protagonist, Alex London. She is a trained art restorer who's had something of a bad time lately, a little down on her luck, but she's recently lucked out in that she's now house-sitting a condo in Seattle and in exchange for restoring the owner's collection of Impressionist paintings. And so she's working on it while the owner's away in France. So she's working on a painting by Utrillo when the telephone rings. Her father will be played by me, Alex will be played by London. Forgive my British accent, it's the best I can do. I write better than I, okay. Good, she picks up the phone. Good morning, my dear, a sunny English accented voice purred. Very good day to you, you're well, I hope.
I'm fine, Jeff, she said curtly. Pointedly, she did not inquire as to whether or not he was also well.
But he was used to this kind of reception from his daughter, and as usual, he barreled right through it. The latest issue of Art News should have been in the mail today. I was wondering if you had had a chance to read it. No,
Jeff, not yet. Why? She couldn't bring herself to tell her father that she couldn't afford a subscription to Art News at $39.95 a year. Not when she could walk over to the Seattle Art Museum library and read it for free was an ongoing mystery to her, particularly inasmuch as her financial straits were the direct result of his screwing up her life so spectacularly.
Well, prepare yourself for a shock, my dear. They didn't put me in the show. Now, what do you think of that?
The show? Her mind was still on the Utrillo.
Moreover, in my opinion, it was by no means an oversight. Helen excluded me on purpose. She never did care for me, you know. She heard the slightest of chuckles. I can't imagine why.
Helen?
Helen Hall Duncan, senior curator at the Bruce Museum, Greenwich, Connecticut. The Bruce Museum, he repeated patiently. We went there, you and I, when you were a nipper of 9. I took you to a charming show full of doggy paintings. You loved it. You remember?
No, she didn't remember. But then Jeffrey London had dragged his little girl to so many museums they were a blur. Sort of, she said. She considered telling him she was busy and hanging up, but now she was curious. So what did this Hall Duncan do that ticked you off so much?
Ticked off? I? Not at all. I merely express righteous indignation to which I am most assuredly entitled, as you will soon agree. You do recall that they have opened a new exhibit, Fakes and Forgeries, the Art of Deception?
She did remember that he had mentioned it, something about it a week or two before. And the problem is?
The problem is, he said, they have none of my work. Nothing. I have not even mentioned, can you believe it? My constables were every bit as good as Keating's, were they not? My Rewalts were far better than Hebborn's, yet their work is generously displayed, and I, not even mentioned? It's outrageous, positively criminal.
Alex closed her eyes and took a deep breath. How many people in this world, she wondered, had fathers that went around grousing? Jeffrey London had a twinkly, jovial way of doing it, but it was still grousing because they didn't get their due respect as world-class forgers. And how in the world could he have retained all of his old verve after what had happened to him? She shook her head, remembering how she had assumed that having been convicted of forgery, theft, and interstate fraud, he would emerge from his 8-year prison term a broken man, a shell of his former self. He had, after all, been a much-respected conservator and restorer on the New York art scene, and a sought-after guest at the cocktail parties and salons of Manhattan's Upper East Side. He was witty, charming, no one could deny that. But when he got out of prison, or so she had thought, he'd be just one more ex-con. He'd still be in demand all right, but it would be by an army of wronged, extremely peeved art collectors with lawsuits under their arms. It was clear, however, that she'd underestimated him. Now, a year out of prison, he had recently shown up in Seattle, where he had used what little money he had left to buy a failing trading company somewhere in the city's grimy freeway/industrial section. Venezia, its name was. And it specialized in supplying hotels and restaurants with schlock art imports, or so he said. What exactly he did there, she didn't know, and she didn't want to know. But it didn't strike her as a good sign that his employees all seemed to be old pals from his art forging days. By his lights, he was doing just fine. Her career, on the other hand, and her life for that matter, had been pretty well ruined by Jeffrey's larcenous past. Well, no fun dwelling on that. Water under the bridge, spilt milk. Besides, Alex, like her father, was not merely a survivor, but a survivor who persisted on looking on the bright side. Well, most of the time. And only today a wonderful new opportunity had presented itself.
Do you want to know what I think is behind it? Jeff was still at it. It's simple, unadorned spite. Petty jealousy.
She shook her head and sighed. Well, you did annoy quite a few people in the art world, you know.
Didn't I, though? He said quietly, and she knew he had that puckish, irresistible, inarguably charming smile on his face. She smiled herself, imagining it, and for a moment she wished she could see it in person. She had loved her father, loved him dearly, but now...
Time to change the subject. Speaking of the art world, she said, unable to stop herself from showing off a little for him, I have a meeting with a collector tonight at a donor's reception at the museum. If it all goes well, this could be the entree I've been hoping for.
Oh, yes? More cleaning, is it? He had never put it in so many words, but she knew that he thought the cleaning of paintings was beneath her abilities.
No, not cleaning. Advising, consulting. She wants some help, some expert advice on a purchase, and somewhere or other she heard that I might be the one for the job.
Well, it's about time people started recognizing your eye, he said with fatherly pride. You're a natural, my dear. I like to flatter myself by thinking it's in the genes.
Well, he might be right about that, she thought. She'd been living and breathing art as long as she could remember. As a teenager, she'd spent many enchanted after-school hours, before she discovered boys, in the workroom of the Met, watching and eagerly learning from her father. That much, at any rate, she owed him.
And what does this mysterious collector of yours collect, he asked? Not more Victorian shaving mugs, I trust.
That was as close to sarcasm as he ever came, and he was referring to her previous consulting job. Little did he know that Victorian shaving mugs were a step up from the one before, which she had gone out of her way not to mention to him. She had been advising a client on aquarium furniture. The little ceramic knickknacks, overflowing treasure chests, and deep-sea divers that bubbled, and mermaids that people put in their aquarium. Who knew there was even a name for them? No, not quite, she said with a certain amount of pride. It's Georgia O'Keeffe she's interested in.
Indeed, he was impressed. Oh, I say, now there's an artist one can get one's teeth into. You'll tell me if you can use any help, won't you? Tiny is very much an O'Keeffe expert. He might well be able to give you a few words of advice.
Tiny, 6'4", 300 pounds plus, was one of Jeff's ex-con employees and almost as charming in his own slow, good-natured way as was Jeff. He could have been a superb mixed media artist, watercolors and pastels in his own right. Unfortunately, he had liked creating Homers and Whistlers more, which is why he was now an ex-con. Thanks, Jeff. I'll keep him in mind. I've got to go now. Still need to do a little more work on this Utrillo.
Utrillo, is it? Do you know, I remember knocking off a Utrillo in a day and a half that was as good as anything Utrillo ever did. Better, if I were going to be honest. I could do an O'Keeffe, too, when you come right down to it. Perhaps not in a day and a half, but give me the subject and, of course, the period, and I think I could...
Bye, Jeff.
With your characteristic sense of humor, these will sell, I can tell. So I'm really looking forward to that.
You want to buy one? We're taking orders.
Yes, I will definitely be on your list of readers.